So I'm going to be sharing a bit about e-marketing for business with you today and looking at some of the ways that we work with our clients and the things to think about when you're looking at a marketing strategy online for your business. Be it a startup, be it a small business, be it a larger business, the same basic rules apply. Just to give a bit of my background, I run a web design agency. I've been involved in e-marketing since the late 90s. I've been involved in online marketing for quite a long time compared to many people. And I've seen the changes over the years in the way that works. And I help businesses, small and large, with developing their online marketing strategy. I've also been involved through my work with the Federation of Small Businesses in working with a large range of different types and sectors of businesses. And that's really given me a breadth of understanding of the challenges when it comes to e-marketing for so many businesses. And hopefully in this session I will help you walk your way through some of the basics and how you can apply those in a business that you're looking at. So let's start off by thinking about the challenge. For many businesses, the challenge is the sheer volume of content that we now have online. When I started out in e-marketing, you wouldn't believe that you could walk into WH Smith's and pick up a book which contained all the websites that were available to us, or certainly the vast majority, in a printed book. It's difficult to imagine that in today's world when you type even a relatively obscure search into Google and see the volume of results that you get back. And so we're competing in a world for our businesses where there's an enormous amount of online noise. And these days it's not just companies and universities and governments producing websites and content online, but it's all of us. User-generated content. Most of the fresh content being generated online today is being generated on platforms like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, etc., etc. We're producing vastly more content every minute than was produced in the entirety of last century. So how do we, as a business, cut through all of that noise and make our voices heard? One of the ways that you can perhaps achieve this, and I'll just touch on this before we go into the world of online marketing, is to look at offline marketing. It used to be that we got a few emails and tons of junk mail through our letterboxes. These days, for many businesses, you get hundreds of emails and very few pieces of post. So one of the ways that sometimes you can cut through the noise is to make sure that you've got an offline marketing campaign as well that's working with your online presence. So don't forget online. But let's start with the basics. That's how we can make a difference in our online marketing. And the first thing to think about is, what problem are you solving? For the businesses that you're working with, for your business, for your customers, what problem are you solving for them? If you aren't able to clearly enunciate what problem you're solving, then you're going to have a problem with marketing in any shape or form. And the thing with this is, so often companies have a wonderful product with a wonderful set of specifications, but actually they've not really thought about how their customers perceive it and what problem they're actually solving for their customers. Sometimes companies come up with a product or a service that's a product in search of a problem, rather than finding the problem and developing a product or a solution to solve it. So be very wary of selling your products or services on a glowing list of specifications. Focus first and foremost on what problem you're solving for the customers that you're selling that product. Who are you targeting? Who are your customers that you're going to be working with? Again, so many companies don't really know this. They haven't really thought about who their ideal customer is. And it's really important when it comes to online advertising, where we can define our audiences very clearly in terms of some of the advertising tools. But if we don't know who our customer is, then we've got a problem. So let's think about who we're targeting. Really focus on male, female, age, sex, what magazines they read, what car they drive, what average annual income they might have, what do they have children or not, do they live in their own home, if they're business, what level of business position are they on? Are you targeting senior managers? Are you targeting junior managers? Is the person making the buying decision actually the receptionist, because that's who gets delegated that particular role? So really think through who the customer is, who you're targeting, who's going to make the buying decision for the product or service that you're selling. And what you can do with that is develop what's known as a marketing persona, i.e. a sort of example person that your product sells to, that you can test then your marketing campaigns against and say, would they see this? Would they like it? Would it appeal to them? And am I solving, in the way that I'm talking about it, the problem that they're facing? So that's something to really think about. Who is your ideal customer? Once you've developed who your ideal customer is, you can start to think about where you find that ideal customer. Are you going to find them online or offline? Are they going to be engaged on social media or not? Are they going to be primarily accessing what you do through a mobile device or through a desktop device? Are they going to be doing it when they're sat at their office desk, or are they going to be doing it as they're out and about in a town centre? Are they going to be more likely to use Facebook, or are they more likely to use YouTube? Is Instagram going to be their thing, or is it going to be Snapchat? So really think through, if you know who your customer is, you can start to think where you're going to find that customer and how you're going to interact with them. For example, if you're targeting a 40-plus-year-old male as a business owner in an engineering firm, that's, primary demographic, then there's probably not a great deal of point in spending a vast amount of marketing time and effort and money on Instagram, because you're not going to find them there. They're far more likely to be, if anywhere, online, on LinkedIn, and probably that email is still a key way of interacting with them. Whereas if I was targeting a new cafe in town, largely aimed at 20s to 30s and students, then I'm going to want to consider Snapchat, Instagram, and some of those sort of platforms as a way of interacting with that audience. So once you know who your customer is, you can start to think about where you're going to find them. Think about state of mind. LinkedIn, very much a business networking and social media website, is far more like going to a shopping centre or to a car showroom, where you expect people to have business conversations to sell to you. It'd be very odd if you went into a car showroom and no salesperson came up to say, what sort of car are you looking for? How can I help you? Whereas Facebook, Instagram and Twitter outside of working hours are far more like being in a pub on a Friday night with friends. You're in a social state of mind. You're about relaxed, building relationships, having a conversation. It's not about the hard sell. It's not about the pitch. And so it's more about building relationships, building your brand, building a friendship, if you like, with your brand. So really think through how you're presenting, state of mind, and the type of marketing, therefore, that you're doing on the various platforms in terms of how that comes across. You need to be able to answer the question of why should they bother? So often companies, again, it ties back to the point of pain, but why should I bother buying from you? Your competitors are only a click away, or if you're selling through a platform, they may be well appearing on the same screen as you. So really think through, why should a customer buy from you? What is it that makes you worth buying from? Develop what's known as your unique selling proposition. What it is about you that makes you valuable for them as a supplier. And if you can't answer that question, don't bother spending time, money, effort on your online marketing until you've answered it, because it won't succeed. Make sure you're making things easy. When it comes to online, we, as I've already mentioned, are only a click away from our competitors. And if you make it hard for them to take the next step of the journey, they land on your website, they can't easily find what they're looking for, the product isn't providing them the information they need to make a buying decision, that it's complicated to work out how much it's going to cost to get it shipped to them, all of those sort of questions, they'll just click the back button and go to one of your competitors, those thousands of listings that there are on Google. So you need to make sure from the moment they land on your website that you're making it really easy for them. And you need to make it clear what action they should take. And this should be the action that you want them to take. So we have some great tools. We've got heat mapping and things like that, which allow us to track where people move their mouse and look at what's more popular or less popular in terms of click actions on a website. And we can use a bit of psychology of sales as well in terms of driving outcomes. So for example, if you've got a product or a service which you've got perhaps a basic option and a high-end option in terms of what you developed so far, then I would argue you need to develop a high-end option, a super top-end option as well, because what most people do when presented with 3 options is they'll go for the middle option. If you present 2 options, they'll go for the bottom option. The reason 3 options work is people don't want to go for the cheapest then, because, well, cheapest may not be the best. They don't want to go for the expensive option. Well, that's a bit, more than I need. It's a bit too expensive. I don't want to take the risk of spending too much. I'll go for the middle option. Whereas if you'd only created 2 options, they'll go for the bottom option because it's the cheaper of the 2. So always develop a middle of the road option that is your preferred option, the one you most want to sell, and then make sure you've got one either side of it to drive them towards that middle option. There's also the whole psychology of sales as well, in terms of, believe it or not, it still works. So people are more likely to buy something that's 99 pence than £1, £2.99 than £3. So there's some basic psychology of sales and pricing which will still work online as well. So think through all of those things. Make sure the actions that you want people to take are clear and easy for them to take. With that, you've got Google Analytics. So Google Analytics data gives you an enormous amount of data. There are other tracking and analysis tools as well for websites. And also most of the advertising platforms will install what is known as the black pixel or similar on the website to allow you to track the traffic that is being utilized. So make sure you look at that data. So let's look at some Google data here. Here's an e-commerce journey. And we can see there where we're getting big fall-offs in the amount of people who come to the website compared to the people who finish their transaction and pay for a product or service. So we should spend our time looking at where those drop-offs happen and making sure we fix the failure points that are causing people to disappear off our website and buy elsewhere. So really keep an eye on the data that you've got. It's really important to make sure your online e-commerce experience works on any device anywhere. These days, people are as likely to access your website on a mobile phone, a tablet, laptop, desktop. They may even transition between them during the sales journey. And they may even have an offline experience as well. Have they been into your retail store first, looked at it in the flesh, as it were, but then gone home to buy it? How do you track a customer through that journey? And there are various means and methods of doing that you will need to investigate. But crucially, certainly, you need to make sure that the sales experience is just as easy on a mobile phone as it is on a laptop, especially if you're doing social media marketing, where people are most likely to have accessed social media through a mobile phone. So if it's not easy for them to come from social media to your website, they're going to fall off. They're going to go to one of your competitors. Make sure your marketing is integrated. So don't have different things happening on different platforms that have a mixed message to your audience who may have engaged with you on multiple platforms. Make sure your offline marketing ties into your online marketing so you have consistency across the piece. Your website is just one part of the jigsaw. So a website's important, don't get me wrong. To have your asset online is important, but it's only one part of the jigsaw. So let's look at how I approach a sort of overarching online marketing strategy for my customers. And I use a approach called the driving wheel. Your website's the end destination. That's where you're going to be pushing people towards at the end of the process. You're then probably going to have a blog, another asset that you own, a sort of place that you're creating content that isn't going to change and be affected by the foibles of social media platforms' different design attitudes at any particular moment. So that's two things. And the blog then becomes the hub of a driving wheel of content. And so you're then sharing that content out on social media, using it for search engine optimization, using it for email marketing. All of that is taking content from your blog, pushing traffic back towards your blog, all of which is driving traffic towards your website. So that's an overarching approach to have when you're looking at your online marketing strategy. How are you driving people towards your final destination on your website, ideally all the way through to a buying decision and handing over their card details, or however you might conclude that buying process? How are you creating a hub of content from a blog or similar? And how are you using all the various assets online to drive traffic to the blog, to your website? Now, don't get me wrong. What I'm not saying here is that you should do every single social media platform or whatever. These are just examples. What I am saying is that you need to make sure that you are using all the ones that are right for your audience to help drive as much traffic as possible towards your website. So what might we be doing online? Social media is these days a bedrock of any online marketing strategy. Search engine advertising, Google Ads, pay-per-click adverts on Google, Bing, etc., etc. Tracking. So whenever you're doing paying for advertising, or even if you're just doing placement on social media, make sure you're utilising their tracking tool so that you can track whether an advert that you've paid for on Facebook, on Google, track it all the way through to the end buying process on your website, and you can see therefore whether the advertising revenue you're spending is being effective and whether you're getting return on investment. And you can optimize it. You can do A/B testing of adverts to see which one drives the most traffic and which one is the most effective for your business. Sponsored placement and content. So on emails, on websites, on perhaps people's blogs, you can sponsor a particular article, you can sponsor a newsletter. With blogging, you can perhaps send out free examples of products to bloggers and they will test and review your product and review it on their blog. You can obviously do influencers on social media, so you can pay for people to post something about your product on their social media platform. Increasingly these days, it's not to one big social media influencer, but it's to a range of what are known as micro influencers, each of them having a smaller audience, maybe only numbering in the thousands rather than the tens or hundreds of thousands, but crucially often more believable and more relevant to the exact audience that you are targeting, rather than a more scattergun approach that you might have with a big name social media celebrity, probably in their own right anyway. So often these days it's the micro influencers that companies are targeting and that you might want to think about utilising. One of the things to not get too hung up on sometimes is about the necessity to be selling through your own website, but to really focus on marketplaces or platforms such as eBay, Amazon, Etsy, not on the high street, etc., etc. And the reason for that is, for example, with Amazon, it is reckoned that over half of all product searches start on Amazon. They don't even start on Google, they're starting directly on Amazon. So if you think about that from your product perspective, if you are not selling on Amazon, that already means you've lost 50% of your potential sales audience if you only sell through your own website. So think about selling through platforms and how you can manage that. Reputation management is also really important. So Trustpilot, sort of ratings on Facebook, Google ratings for Google My Business listing, TripAdvisor for restaurants, cafes, B&Bs, etc. All of those are online reputation management. Why is that really important? Well, it's social proof. These days, the biggest one of the biggest things that decide somebody's buying decision is, do my friends, do my social network approve of this product? Is it something that other people who I trust have approved of? And so getting that social proof for your product, that again is why micro-influencers on social media have become more important in many respects, rather than somebody who I feel more distant from. My own social network approving of what I'm considering buying is really important. So think about how you're going to manage that reputation. Are you encouraging good reviews? Are you encouraging people to respond to your product online? And some of these tools, like Trustpilot, for example, have a paid for service to assist you with managing your reputation and developing that. Likewise, on TripAdvisor, there have been a lot of published stories where people have manipulated listings, both for good and bad, on TripAdvisor. So while we invest as consumers a lot of trust in some of these platforms, they're not entirely trustworthy. And which is again why it's increasingly important that I don't just want to see reviews in general, but I want to see reviews from people I know, like and trust to influence my buying decision. What's this all about at the end of the day for online marketing? Well, we're about developing a database. We want a database of customers that we can sell to. And so with that, there are three key stages. We're looking to grow a database. We're looking to develop contacts, especially if we're a new product or service entering a market. Nobody knows we exist. Nobody knows potentially even our product exists. We've got to develop contacts to just grow awareness. So we'll do that perhaps through social media advertising. We will have to pay to grow that awareness initially, be that advertising, be that perhaps using influencers, whatever else it might be, for target an audience in social media. Search engine optimization and search engine advertising. So if we know we're solving a problem that people have got, that they are going to be searching on Google for that problem, then we can pay to make sure that our result appears in a search for the problem that we're solving. Once we've got those contacts becoming aware of us, we're looking to retain them. So people may not be ready to make a buying decision immediately. For example, if I'm selling insurance, we tend to only renew our insurance once a year. And so if I've just purchased and renewed my insurance, then there's no point trying to pitch for me to buy new insurance straight away. I'm not going to be in a buying decision to do that at this moment. So what I need to look at is making sure that I retain that customer in a sort of holding cycle until they're ready to make the buying decision. And the way I will perhaps do that is engage them with relevant, interesting content through my social media platforms. Perhaps get them to sign up to an email newsletter so they can be informed, not with pushy sales messages all the time, but just to keep them engaged and informed with the right type of content that will appeal to that marketing persona that we developed when we're thinking about who our customer is. We might do some offline retention processes as well. But crucially, of course, it's no point growing an enormous database of customers if we never convert them. So the final step of this is to convert them into paying customers. How do we do that? We need to make sure we've got calls to action on the activity we're pushing out online. So make sure that some of your social updates do have a bit more of a salesy message. Make sure that your email does occasionally have a call to action in it. Make sure that your website has clear, compelling calls to action. What can we do with that? Well, put a time limit on an offer or a product or service that will only be available for a certain time. Do particular focus, a focus of the month or whatever else it might be. Think about seasonality, all of these sort of things that create a reason why somebody should make the decision to buy now. There's many tools around that. But crucially, don't forget to convert, because unfortunately, many businesses focus so much time and effort on growing a database, but forget to actually convert them into paying customers. A final thing, of course, is once you've sold to somebody once, don't sell to them once and then forget about them. Have a retention cycle. So we put them back into the retention cycle and we look to sell them to them over and over again. The rule of thumb has been that it's 7 times cheaper to sell to the same person again than it is to acquire a new customer. And we want to keep those cost savings. So let's make sure we have a good retention cycle. What we don't want is when somebody comes to renew their insurance next year, that the only reason they've heard about us in the entire 12 months in between is just that one email telling them your renewal is now due and by the way your premium has doubled. No, we need to grow a relationship ongoing with them, that they feel valued as a customer and want to buy from us again. So just to finish off with, what sort of things would I be looking for in an overall online marketing plan and strategy? Target audience. Who are my customers? What problem am I solving for them? How am I going to make it easy for them to buy and give them a compelling proposition that they will want? Aims and objectives. Do I know what I'm trying to achieve in my marketing strategy? Unfortunately, so many companies do not clearly define what they're trying to achieve, and they don't put some key performance indicators against that to track performance. So make sure you've got that you know who you're targeting and you know what you're trying to do with them. And the amount of times I have conversations, oh, social media's not worked for me. Well, what were you trying to achieve? I don't know, but it wasn't working for me. Don't be that person. Make sure you know what your aims and objectives are. Channels. What channels are going to be the right channels for you to reach the audience that you're trying to reach? Don't do a scattergun approach. Don't invest time and energy and effort and money into platforms that aren't going to give you the best return on investment. So really think through who that customer is and therefore what channels are most appropriate. Core activity. Make sure you've got a basic set of stuff that you're going to be doing, that you're comfortable and confident with, that you can be pushing out regularly to engage with your audience. Think through a calendar of the year. What are the key dates? If I'm a cafe or a restaurant, a particular restaurant, let's say, I want to be focusing on Valentine's Day, Easter, Mothering Sunday, Father's Day, the run up to Christmas, Wimbledon for, strawberries and cream as desserts as a reason to come along. All of those different things that we can put into a planner for the year that gives us fresh ideas for content and gives us a focus. It also means we perhaps want to look at where there are particular sales dips in the year, when revenue drops, and what we can do from a campaign at that particular point to boost our sales at that particular point in the year. Micro campaigns. So these are short, sharp campaigns focused on a particular thing, often around seasonality. What are we going to look like? What's our messaging going to be? What's our content type going to be on a day-to-day basis? What's the look and feel of our social media? And that's a crucial thing to get right, to get that consistency there across our platforms and so that it's consistent across our brand. How often are we going to engage? What frequency is right for the audience that we're targeting, and how can we resource that? Where are we going to get the content from? If we want to post industry relevant news, how have we got good sources for that news that we can comment on? All of those sort of questions. If you're working for a larger organisation, where can you make sure you get the relevant up-to-date information from the relevant stakeholders within the business? Building an audience. How are we going to, in the early stages, particularly of a campaign, build the right type of audience? Do we understand where we're going to reach them? And a key part of that is going to be paid placement, paying for social media advertising, paying for Google Ads, etc. So those two very much work together, and we need to make sure that we can resource that, i.e. have we got the budget, have we got the time to invest in building an audience and in building a relevant targeted advertising campaign to reach out to our ideal customers. And if you're going to struggle to resource, what you don't want to do is go off all guns blazing, fantastic for the first 3 or 4 weeks, and then it all peters out because you've run out of time or you've run out of money. So make sure that you've got a method of resourcing this for the long term. Social media, etc., is normally not a quick win. So you need to make sure you can engage and do this for the longer term. When you've developed your plan, do a SWOT analysis on it. Where are its strengths? Crucially, where are the weaknesses? What opportunities have you perhaps so far missed? And what are the threats, things that you may not have even thought of? In this last 12 months, through a crisis that most of us could never have imagined, many businesses have struggled to keep going. And that's just an example of a threat which, you know, most of us wouldn't have even considered back in the end of 2019. So what are the threats that you haven't even considered? What are the things that may, and this is where it's worth perhaps where you've got a trusted mentor or other people who can provide a bit of an external voice to sort of talk to them about your plan and say, where do you think the problems are with it? So I really would recommend a mentor or working with an expert consultancy or something who can sometimes suggest things that you may not have thought about. As well, it's important to be able to report. Have you got the tools that will allow you to find out whether things are working? And often you may well have to report to either investors, shareholders, your finance director, whoever it might be, on whether things are working well. So make sure you've got the tools in place to report on whether things are working out as they should do. So hopefully that's given you an oversight, an overview of how I would approach an online marketing campaign for a business, small or large. The basics are the same. The level of detail you might put into some of those plans may be more complex for a larger organisation with multiple brands and so on, but the fundamentals are the same for whatever size, shape or sector of business that you are working for. But it's really important to get these right. And the really early fundamentals are the most important that so often aren't there. Who's my customer? What problem am I solving? Where am I going to find them? What should I therefore invest my time, money and effort into are really important questions to start any form of online marketing strategy. Thank you very much.